Right then, let's get into it because there's quite a bit to unpack after what has been a very revealing few days off the pitch at Celtic. While the international break keeps the players busy elsewhere, the focus around Parkhead has firmly shifted to what's happening behind closed doors. And spoiler alert, it's not all that pretty. Monday's meeting between the club and several supporters groups, including the Celtic Fans Collective, was supposed to open dialogue, smooth things over, maybe even show signs of progress. But if anything, it feels like the gap between the boardroom and the terraces has only grown wider. And when you hear both sides' version of events, it's like they weren't even in the same room. Now, just to set the scene here, this wasn't some random fan forum with a couple of handshakes and a few platitudes. This was a serious sit-down, brought about by months of mounting pressure and a signed open letter by over 400 individuals and groups demanding clarity on some huge issues. Everything from the club's long-term football strategy to transfer dealings, fan experience, matchday atmosphere, ticket pricing, governance, and more. Sitting across the table from the fan reps were some of the most senior figures at Celtic: Michael Nicholson, Chris McKay, SLO John Paul Taylor, and a handful of other directors involved in operations, legal matters, and commercial activity. So, this was not a small deal. This was the club saying, right, let's talk. But what followed was, according to the fans present, a masterclass in deflection, denial, and missed opportunities. Let's start with the version from the Celtic Fans Collective. Their statement was clear, sharp, and, honestly, pretty scathing. They claimed that throughout the meeting, Celtic leadership showed a lack of humility, awareness, and most critically, accountability. Rather than own up to the concerns raised, like the absolute state of the transfer windows or the clear erosion of fan trust, the club, according to the collective, tried to pin the problem on communication issues. Not structure, not performance, not culture, just how things are being perceived. Which, let's be real, is the kind of answer you give when you're not willing to admit there's a real problem in the first place. There was some particularly strong language, too. The collective didn't mince words when they said both Michael Nicholson and Chris McKay's positions at the club were untenable. And while they admitted they weren't expecting an overnight change in leadership, they made it crystal clear that they don't see a way forward with those two continuing in their current roles. That's a massive statement from a well-organized fan group and speaks volumes about where the trust levels are right now. Zero, basically. On the topic of transfers, probably the area that stings most for supporters, especially after some very underwhelming windows, the club apparently defended their strategy. They said there were various external challenges, including tax laws in different countries and the UEFA 70% squad cost regulation, which they also mentioned in their infamous Saturday night statement a few weeks back. But come on, these are things every other club in Europe deals with. This isn't unique to Celtic. When the board points to those sorts of excuses, it just sounds like more smoke and mirrors. What fans see is a club failing to act like a big club in the market, failing to back the manager properly, and falling short of where we need to be, not just in Scotland, but especially in Europe. There was also an interesting little nugget in there about how transfer payments over a certain threshold require board approval, via email, apparently. So decisions on major signings are being run through inboxes instead of proactive football planning? That's about as modern as using a fax machine in 2025. It's just more evidence that the club's processes are outdated and not fit for purpose. When pushed about accountability for recent failings, like poor transfer windows, regression in Europe, and the general mess the club's communication has been, the board apparently rejected the very idea of being held accountable. Let that sink in. They dismissed the premise of accountability. There was also a discussion around the rumor that a senior club figure had briefed against Brendan Rodgers to the media. Specifically, the Scottish Sun Michael Nicholson called that closed, saying a conversation happened between the board and the manager, but there was no further detail. Again, zero transparency. The fans came looking for answers and got stone walls. The collective summed it up by saying that the meeting only reinforced their belief that change is not just needed, it's urgent. But here's the twist. Celtic, bizarrely, seemed to come out of that same meeting thinking it had been productive. They released a statement the following evening that painted a very different picture. In their view, they were open, transparent, and committed to improving supporter engagement. They even said they're planning to release full minutes of the meeting, assuming both sides can agree on the content, which, at this point, seems wildly optimistic. Because if the initial reactions are anything to go by, the two accounts are worlds apart. Now, to give some credit, Celtic did mention some tangible actions coming out of the meeting. They say they want to involve fan representatives in talks with Police Scotland around the Firehurst report, which relates to safety and stewarding on match days. There's also talk of reviewing supporter engagement processes and creating a new working group for safe standing at Celtic Park. All decent ideas on paper, but again, it's hard to shake the feeling that it's all surface-level stuff. None of this addresses the deep-rooted frustrations that fans have about how the club is being run. It's like putting a fresh coat of paint on a house with a crumbling foundation. And then there's this strange new job post. The club is hiring a head of business operations, supposedly to improve supporter relations. Sounds great, right? But when you actually read the job description, it's mostly focused on managing retail, hospitality, and non-match day events. Stadium tours, e-commerce, restaurants. All important in their own way, sure, but not exactly tackling the core issues. It reeks of trying to be seen doing something without actually doing anything that matters. The cynic in me thinks this is just a PR move, a job that can be pointed to when critics say the club isn't listening to fans. What all this shows, really, is how wide the disconnect has grown between Celtic's leadership and its lifeblood, the supporters. The board seems utterly convinced they're doing a fine job. But in the last 6 months, the club has gone from being a credible Champions League side to struggling in the Europa League. Celtic Park, once one of the most iconic stadiums in the world, is reportedly looking tired, run down, and neglected, according to many who attend week in, week out. And despite being a club with the history and stature to set standards, we're still running like it's the early 2000s. Or worse, the 90s. The most worrying part? The people in charge don't seem to see it. Or maybe they do and just don't care, as long as the numbers in the bank account keep going up. They're drastically underestimating just how strong and united fan feeling has become. And this isn't going away. Not with vague statements, not with job postings full of corporate waffle, and not with half-hearted meetings that don't lead to real change. The collective isn't backing down. That much is obvious. And now it's about what happens next. Will we see more vocal protests? A ramp up in pressure? There's already been talk about things like boycotting club merchandise, something that hits the bottom line without directly affecting the players on the pitch. And that's the real challenge here. As supporters, we want change, proper change, but we don't want to see the team suffer. No one wants to see Celtic losing the league, getting hammered in Europe, or spiraling into chaos. But at the same time, if nothing changes behind the scenes, we're just going to keep repeating this cycle. So the big question now is this. Does real change only happen when things get so bad on the pitch that the board is forced to act? Or is there a way to force that change without having to endure a full-on crisis? There's a growing sense that if the boardroom won't listen to reason, then maybe they'll start to listen when the money stops flowing in. That's why ideas like a merchandise boycott are getting real traction now. It's targeted, it's symbolic, and crucially, it doesn't impact the players or the manager on the pitch. Imagine the message it would send if thousands of fans simply stopped buying the new kits, the scarves, the hats, the matchday programs. That would show up in the financial reports quicker than any protest banner. And let's be honest, for a club that seems to value balance sheets more than banners, that kind of pressure might actually force a rethink. You can already see the signs that the club's commercial side isn't exactly thriving. There's been talk of falling merchandise sales over the last month. So if that's already happening without any organized effort, what happens when fans do start actively pushing for a coordinated boycott? That's the kind of silent protest that speaks volumes. It doesn't affect the 11 on the park, but it makes life very uncomfortable for the ones upstairs who are supposed to be steering the ship. And this is the balance we're all wrestling with right now. Nobody wants to throw the team under the bus. Nobody wants to see Brendan Rodgers struggling with a threadbare squad while the fans are making life even harder. But the truth is, a lot of this struggle is already happening, and it's not the fans' fault. It's the result of years of half measures, questionable decisions, and a refusal to evolve. You look at where Celtic are in Europe right now, and it's a shadow of what this club should be. You look at the recruitment, the facilities, the way we're engaging with supporters, or rather, not engaging. And it paints the picture of a club that's coasting on reputation rather than pushing forward with ambition. The next few weeks could be pivotal. There's another meeting scheduled in Glasgow after the international break, and all eyes are going to be on what the Celtic fans collective decide to do. Do they double down and escalate things? Do they go down the protest route in a more visible way, perhaps even on match days? Or do they take a more strategic approach, trying to win the long game by targeting revenue streams and forcing the board to take action where it hurts most, the club's financial image? Whatever happens, it's becoming harder and harder for the board to ignore the noise. And if they are ignoring it, then they're more out of touch than anyone feared. You can't have a stadium full of discontent and pretend everything's fine just because you've sold a few more season tickets. Eventually, that discontent grows. It spreads. It becomes part of the matchday experience. And once the atmosphere goes, once the fans stop believing in what the club stands for, that's when things start to rot from the inside out. And Celtic Park isn't immune to that. For all its history, for all the legendary nights and the banners and the passion, the reality is the ground's not looking its best these days. Fans are noticing. From the worn-out seating to the lack of modern amenities, to the general feeling that the place is being maintained at the bare minimum. It all adds up. You can't ask supporters to pay premium prices for a subpar experience and expect loyalty to last forever. Loyalty isn't unconditional, not when it's being taken for granted. People will always love the club, but the people running it? That's a different story. And what about the idea of protests around the stadium? Peaceful, visual, meaningful demonstrations that highlight dissatisfaction without disrupting the players. That's another path that could be taken. Maybe it's banners. Maybe it's walkouts. Maybe it's silence during parts of the match to show the board exactly what a soulless Celtic Park feels like. These are tough decisions, because nobody wants to ruin a Saturday at the football. But if the aim is long-term success, sometimes the short-term discomfort is a price worth paying. Especially when the alternative is letting things drift further into mediocrity. There's also a bigger question about Celtic's identity right now. What kind of club do we want to be? A well-oiled domestic machine that dominates a weak league but flops in Europe? Or a serious football institution that can compete, grow, and adapt to the modern game? Because the current path isn't sustainable. The domestic dominance won't last forever, not with the kind of mismanagement we're seeing. And when that slips, what are we left with? A club stuck in the past, out of step with its supporters, and no longer feared by anyone outside of Scotland. That's the nightmare scenario. And unless something gives, we're heading in that direction. Before we proceed, subscribe to our channel and enable notifications to receive all exclusive news about Celtic FC. Don't miss any details about your favorite team. It's extremely important for Celtic FC fans. Edinburgh's goalkeeping circles are buzzing this week as strong rumors swirl around Tynecastle. ZANDER Clark, Hearts #1 and Scotland international, has allegedly rejected a contract extension and is instead plotting a sensational switch to Celtic Park. According to whispers close to Gorgie, Clark, 32, has been in quiet discussions with representatives linked to Celtic since late summer. The move, if it comes to pass, would see the former St. Johnstone hero trade maroon for green and white, a decision that's already stirring debate among fans across the capital and beyond. Hearts are said to have offered a respectable new deal, one that would keep Clark as a key figure in Stephen Naismith's plans. But insiders suggest the keeper has grown increasingly tempted by the prospect of Champions League nights and regular silverware, opportunities that remain scarce at Tynecastle despite recent progress. The pull of playing under Brendan Rodgers, combined with Celtic's rotation concerns between the posts, could make this more than mere gossip. In Glasgow, the chatter has only intensified. Celtic supporters' forums have been abuzz with talk of Clark being eyed as a reliable homegrown option, one who could add depth, experience, and stability behind Joe Hart's successor. Some even claim that early feelers have been put out to gauge the player's interest, and that Clark's camp has given a favorable response. Nothing official has been confirmed by either club, of course. Hearts remain tight-lipped, while Celtic's usual no-comment stance only adds fuel to the fire. Still, the timing of the rumors, right after Clark reportedly turned down an improved offer from Hearts, feels more than coincidental. If the move does materialize, it would mark one of the most dramatic domestic transfers in recent seasons, a Scotland international leaving Hearts on a free to join one of their fiercest rivals. For now, it's all whispers and speculation, but in Scottish football, Where smoke tends to lead to fire, few are betting against it. One thing's for sure. Zander Clark's future is the talk of the terraces, and the coming weeks could reshape not just his career, but the goalkeeping landscape of the Premiership itself. Hello, fan. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel, as it means a lot to Celtic FC. Also, share your opinion about the news in the comments below. See you in the next video.